In this video, I'm going to share some top tips for anyone building paper puppets out of my templates and tutorials. Welcome along. If you're stumbling on this before having ever seen any of my other videos, my name is Ben Stanley and I design and create working replicas of beloved muppets, puppets, characters and creatures all out of paper. You can check out some of my paper puppet builds over here. Now, what I set this channel up for is to inspire you to get creative and hopefully give it a go yourself. And brilliantly, that's what some of you are doing. But I also know that the process can be fiddly and it can take a lot of time. And so what I thought would be useful is to put together a video with my 8 top tips to help you build the paper puppets on my channel. So let's get into it.
Tip 1. Patience.
Top tip number 1, patience. Or in other words, give yourself lots of time and take breaks. I'd certainly give myself a day to do any of these. I mean, the builds themselves can take between 2 to 5 hours depending on which one you're doing because of all the cutting and the gluing. So it's really important not to sort of focus on the end result, but rather to enjoy the process and have patience. Top tip number 2, practice. Or in other words, do a practice run first. Now, this is obviously going to take more time, but there are definitely advantages to doing this. And I never create a puppet without first doing a dry run using some straightforward printer paper. The advantages being that it allows you to kind of try out all the fiddly bits and make the mistakes, without it being a waste of all your sort of the colour paper you've bought for the final one. And also, because printer paper is thinner than the paper you'll ideally be using for the puppet, it actually probably is going to be a bit trickier to make and it's more likely to rip when you're doing the dry run. Whereas when you get to doing the actual puppet and the paper's a bit thicker, it should actually be easier to put together, and even the final piece will just be a bit stronger overall. So I definitely recommend a practice run first.
Me.
Top tip number 3, paper, or in other words, choosing the right paper. Now, in terms of thickness, I'd recommend using paper anywhere between 120 GSM and you can go up to 160 GSM, although that's closer to cardboard, and the thicker the paper you have, the stronger it gets, but maybe the less flexible it gets. So I tend to work at 120. 120 is GSM, just means the thickness of the paper. So normal printer paper is about 80 GSM. So yeah, and that's really useful for doing a practice run. But I would use 120 for the main puppet. Also, I use A4 sheets of paper. Obviously, in the States, you have, I think Legal would be the best to use. You could print out my templates on Legal and then sort of cut it out, and that would give you what you need. And the other thing to say is I often like to use sugar or craft paper for the final puppets because I like the texture that it gives. But if you're using thinner paper, what I'd recommend is if you've got any areas where you can see there's going to be a join or there's going to be movement, then I would maybe just glue on the back some extra paper around that area just to give it that extra strength so that it doesn't rip when it's sort of moving. There we go, choosing the right paper.
Top tip 4. Printing.
Top tip number 4, printing. So with printing, there's a couple of things. Firstly, just make sure when you print it that the scale is to 100%. It might mean that when you print it out, the very edges of the pattern are missing, but you should be able to work, there won't be much, and you should be able to work it out from looking at the PDF on the computer. Also, I would recommend printing either from like Adobe Reader or from Chrome browser. And then the other thing, as I mentioned before, is if you're printing it out in the States, you can print it out to legal size, and that should encompass the A4 size within it, and then you can sort of cut it out and do it to the same scale as I'm doing with my A4 sheets. So that's printing.
Tip 5. Scoring.
Top tip number 5, scoring. So this was actually really important because if you don't score the pattern lines before you fold, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble. So what I recommend doing is getting either a scoring tool, or if you can't find one, what works really well is a biro that's used up all its ink. So you can use this, and I would recommend a metal ruler. And then before you do any folding, you go along the pattern, you look for the mountain and the valley folds. So valley folds, mountain folds, doesn't matter which, you're going to score it on the same side of the pattern. So you just follow all of them, make sure they're all scored. And obviously if it's a non-linear score, you just sort of follow the pattern round. And once you do that, it's going to make your life so much easier when you come to fold and glue.
Pika, 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 pika.
Top tip number 6, gluing. So I find that glue sticks are the best type of glue to use for creating the paper puppets. I've tried other glues, they're just too liquid, but it works really nicely. You don't need to use a lot, just a sparing amount. And what you do have to do is often hold the paper together for maybe a couple of minutes to make sure it bonds. So it does take time, but it also allows you, if you slightly misalign, it gives you a couple of seconds to realign the paper. So that's really useful. Often I find it's easier to apply the glue with a spatula, or I often use a sort of cocktail stick. But definitely glue sticks are the way forward as far as I'm concerned.
Tip 7. Acceptance.
Top tip number 7, acceptance, or in other words, Zen and the art of papercraft. And this one is quite important because if you can expect and accept that rips and mistakes are going to happen, then life's going to be a lot easier. And remember, actually, if a mistake does happen, the great thing is you're working with paper, so it's quite easy just to grab another sheet and do it again. So be Zen about it. Mistakes are going to happen.
Tip 8. Resources.
And finally, top tip number 8, resources. And this is really just a reminder to use all the resources available to you. So obviously there's this video that I've just created, there's the template you're using, there's the video of the build that takes you through it, and feel free to watch that as many times as you like. As well as that, in the descriptions of each of the video, I'm often giving an extra few pointers as well. So there's all those resources, plus there's also me. So if you're having a particular problem, you can drop me a line in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you and help you out. So yeah, make sure you're using all the resources available to you. Well, thank you for watching this. I hope it was helpful. If it was, and if you're still here, please consider giving a like to the video. And if you haven't subscribed already, I'd be grateful if you do that. But that's it really. So I look forward to seeing you next time, and do let me know how you're getting on in the comments. All right, take care. Bye-bye.